You can read a room in seconds, a face, a tone of voice, a text message that feels slightly off. But there's a skill your ancestors had that you've almost completely lost, and you probably don't even notice the gap where it used to be. It's the ability to read the world itself. Not people, the world. Dirt, grass, broken branches, the angle of a shadow, the specific way wind moves through leaves. For most of human history, that kind of attention wasn't a hobby. It was survival. And the people who mastered it weren't just gathering food. They were doing something that looks, in hindsight, almost exactly like science. In the Kalahari Desert, there's a group of trackers who can look at a single footprint pressed into sand and tell you which animal made it, how fast it was moving, how long ago it passed, whether it was injured, and sometimes even its mood. Not from a full trail, from one print. How is that possible? A researcher named Louis Liebenberg spent decades studying these trackers, and what he found reshaped how some scientists think about the origins of human intelligence itself. Liebenberg argued that tracking wasn't just a practical skill. It was, structurally, the very first form of scientific reasoning. Think about what tracking actually requires. You see a print. You form a hypothesis. This is a kudu, moving at a walk about 2 hours ago. Then you keep walking, and the world either confirms your guess or breaks it. A print sharpens. A branch is bent the wrong way. Your hypothesis was wrong, so you build a new one on the spot. And you keep testing it against reality, step by step, for hours. That's not folklore. That's the exact same loop taught in a research methods class. Observe, hypothesize, test, revise. Except trackers were doing this thousands of years before anyone wrote it down. And here's the part that should stop you. This wasn't a rare specialist talent, like being unusually good at math. This was baseline, ordinary. The expected level of attention for an ordinary adult moving through an ordinary day. You could not survive without noticing everything. A displaced pebble might mean a predator passed recently. A slightly bent blade of grass might mean prey walked by an hour ago. The specific pattern of birds scattering in the distance might mean something large is moving that you can't see yet. None of this was mystical. It was pattern recognition, trained relentlessly over years, starting in early childhood. Compare that to how you move through your day now. You walk past dozens of faces without registering a single one. You read a paragraph and forget it by the next line. You've probably checked your phone in the last hour without even deciding to. That's not a personal failing, it's the predictable result of a completely different environment. A researcher named Gloria Mark has spent years studying attention in modern digital environments, and her findings are almost uncomfortable to sit with. On average, people now maintain focused attention on a single screen for well under a minute before switching away, even when nothing is actively distracting them. Under a minute. A tracker could hold sustained, unbroken attention on a single trail for hours, not because they were unusually disciplined, because their entire environment rewarded it, moment by moment, with information that mattered. Your environment rewards something else entirely. It rewards switching. Every notification, every new tab, every autoplay video is a tiny reward for looking away from what you were just doing. You haven't lost the capacity for deep attention. You've been trained thousands of times a day to abandon it. This is where the story gets stranger, because tracking wasn't only about hunting. It was a form of storytelling written into the earth itself. A skilled tracker could reconstruct an entire narrative from signs most people would walk straight past. Here, an animal paused and looked back. Here, it caught a scent and changed direction. Here, something startled it and it ran. That's not just observation, that's narrative reconstruction from fragmentary evidence, which is, again, essentially what a detective does, what a doctor does reading symptoms, what a scientist does reading data. You still have this machinery in your brain. It didn't disappear. It's just aimed somewhere else now. Instead of reading footprints, you read notifications. Instead of reconstructing an animal's path from bent grass, you reconstruct a friend's mood from how quickly they replied to a text. The underlying skill, pattern detection from partial evidence, is still firing constantly. It's just running on much thinner, much faster, much less meaningful data, and that substitution comes at a cost. Deep tracking required something modern attention rarely gets anymore: sustained, uninterrupted engagement with one continuous thread of information over long stretches of time. That kind of attention builds something. It builds pattern libraries in the brain deep enough to notice the one detail that matters buried inside 100 that don't. Rapid switching does the opposite. It keeps you constantly at the surface. You collect fragments instead of patterns. You recognize headlines instead of understanding stories. You skim 100 conversations instead of sitting inside one long enough for it to actually change your thinking. So what happened? Why did this ability fade if it was so fundamental? Partly, it's simple disuse. A skill built entirely on close contact with a complex natural environment doesn't have much to grab onto in a paved, climate-controlled, screen-lit world. There's no wind pattern to read in an office building. There's no track to follow across a subway platform. But partly, it's something more direct. Modern environments are specifically engineered to reward the opposite behavior. Attention economies profit from your gaze moving quickly and often, not from it settling deeply on one thing. The incentives that once rewarded sustained noticing now reward constant switching, because switching is where clicks and views and engagement live. You didn't lose this skill by accident. You lost it because almost nothing around you asks for it anymore, and quite a lot around you is actively working against it. Here's the strange hope buried in all of this. The underlying capacity isn't gone. It's dormant. The same brain that once tracked a kudu across sand for 6 hours can still hold that kind of attention. You've simply never asked it to. Not for that long. Not on one continuous thing. Not without an escape hatch nearby. People who spend serious time in nature, hiking, birdwatching, even just sitting still outside without a phone, often describe a strange sensation after a while. The world gets louder, in a good way. Details that were always there suddenly become visible. A sound in the distance, a shift in light, the way an animal moves differently right before it startles. That's not magic returning. That's the old system booting back up, because you finally gave it a stretch of time and a complex enough environment to actually use it on. You don't need to become a tracker. You're not going to reconstruct an antelope's morning from a bent leaf anytime soon. But the version of you that could hold long, unbroken attention on one real thing and slowly notice more and more inside it isn't a different person than you are now. It's the same brain your ancestors used to read the ground beneath their feet. It's just been asleep for a while, waiting for something worth that kind of attention again.